If you think making six figures a month from art sounds too good to be true, I get it, but I'm going to show you how I made $151,414 last month from 5 different revenue streams. I'm going to break down exactly where that came from, what it cost me, how much was profit, and why some of these revenue streams work way better than others, and how you can get started with them too. Because if someone like me who never went to art or business school can figure this out, maybe there's something useful here for you too. And before you click away thinking like this is some guru nonsense, let me be super clear about something. This took me almost 20 years to figure out. When I first started my very first jewelry business in 2006, it was honestly a hot mess. I was making products nobody wanted, I couldn't find my customers online, and I was pricing everything wrong. That same business actually lost money last month. When you see a number like, $150,000, I know it might sound hard to believe, but here's the thing. Neither my husband nor I went to art school. In fact, I was terrible at art in school. I cannot draw or paint. I have too much fear around it. We both learned Photoshop online, and for me, I learned polymer clay sculpting from YouTube videos, Google, books, asking questions, and a lot of trial and error. When I started, my work looked terrible, but I kept practicing and I got better. And it took me 6 to 8 years to make a full-time income from my first business because I made every single mistake possible, which we will talk about. But each business after that got easier because I learned what actually works. Having multiple revenue streams isn't just about making more money. Of course, that's nice. Who would ever say no to that? And I know that's a lot of people's objection is, if you're doing so well with one revenue stream, why do you need another? It's really all about not putting all your eggs in one basket. Some months, Etsy sales tank. Sometimes ad costs go up. Having different income sources means I am not panicking when one thing goes wrong. The next thing to point out is we made all that money while only working part-time hours. A lot of these income streams for us is pretty leveraged income, which is kind of like passive income, but not exactly, in that we don't have to show up for the money to come in, right? It just comes in, whether or not we show up. But we do, of course, still have to do some work. A while back, I documented where my time was going for an entire week, and I was shocked that I consistently overestimated how much time I actually spent working, because I usually feel like I got so much done at the end of the day. I work on average 3 to 5 hours per day on my businesses. The rest of my time is spent on auditions. I'm an actor here in Los Angeles doing creative care stuff, which is like self-care, but for my creativity, reading, playing video games. I love playing games, taking classes, learning, masterminding with friends, which I also love doing because they help expand my mind and give me different perspectives. I love also going out to try new restaurants in town. Anyway, all of this money was possible for us to make without working full-time hours, while we get to live this full life outside of work. But keep in mind that it did take us many years of business experience to get to here, and we also do have a team that supports us. So let's break down the first revenue stream. You've probably heard that Etsy is oversaturated or that it's impossible to make real money there anymore. The problem, though, isn't that Etsy doesn't work or that it's too competitive, which is actually true on both accounts, but I find the bigger problem tends to be that people get emotionally trapped by it. So let me tell you what happened to my husband. So with one of our stores selling personalized art using print on demand, this business made $26,200 last month on Etsy alone. Now, when we started in 2019, we set up our own website from day one. And then a few months later, we also started selling on Etsy. Here's where things got interesting. Etsy has this incredible allure. It is super easy to set up. There is a built-in audience, and you can literally make your first sale the next day if you have good products and photos and good keywords. And you have, okay, maybe it's not as easy as I'm making it sound to be. But my husband did exactly that, right? He started seeing a lot of sales really fast on Etsy. Now, I teach people to do more of what works. And a lot of people say that too. And it's usually good advice. But my husband then took that to mean, okay, I should focus even more on Etsy because it's doing well. Sales were coming so easily there. So the thought is, this is where I need to spend my time, right? So he started building all of these systems and automations for Etsy. He would research the latest Etsy tips, optimize listings constantly, try to crack the algorithm and really learn to understand what it cares about. Meanwhile, our own website, the thing we actually owned, started getting zero attention. Then something happened that I see happen all the time. Etsy sales start dropping. the algorithm changed, competition increased, the economy, who knows what happened. But his response was very human. When something stops working, something that used to work well especially, we feel compelled to fix it, right? So he doubled down even more on Etsy, and it became like an abusive relationship. Etsy would give him just enough success to keep him hooked, then it would pull away. He would get frustrated, work harder on Etsy, and then completely ignore our own website. Our website traffic and sales started tanking because nobody was paying attention to it. I have seen this exact pattern with other people and even with our clients. I had one client who built a 7-figure business entirely on Etsy. They started with my Aseo Day business system program. They had 0 product when they were starting out, and they became incredibly successful in a few short years until they weren't. When sales started dropping, instead of focusing on building out their own asset, their website, they kept going back to Etsy because that's where they'd seen the most potential. So they're stuck on this constant downhill spiral. The lesson here is that Etsy is like renting an apartment. You can make it work and even make good money out of it. You can be happy in an apartment, but you're still paying rent to a landlord who can change the rules anytime they want, and they do change the rules a lot. Not to mention, you're not building your own equity. What we focus on for building up a successful Etsy shop is pretty simple. We optimize our product listings for high click-through rates from search and running Etsy ads. Of course, optimizing our listings in itself can be like a whole course because it involves so much from the product, the pricing, the keywords, the photos, the videos. But generally speaking, bottom line is I always say to never make Etsy the main focus. Now, I'm not anti-Etsy. It is a great place to start. It's a great place to diversify to eventually when you want to make more sales on other platforms. But Etsy should never be the only place you focus your sales efforts because that is honestly a recipe for a disaster. You need something secure, steady, and stable, like, in your relationships, like that rock in your business, in your life. That is your own website. Etsy can be part of your strategy, but it should never be your whole strategy. Because when you put all your eggs in that Etsy basket where so much is out of your control and things change so often, you're not going to stay in the game for very long. And it's a harrowing hamster wheel to be in. Too many people close their shops, give up and quit just a few years later because of the ups and downs that are just too much to handle. Most people think building your own website is hard to do and making sales is also hard because unlike Etsy, there's no built-in audience when you are on your own site. But what if I told you we made almost the exact same amount on our own website last month for the same business? $27,809 to be exact. That's even a little bit more than Etsy. And building that website was way easier than you think. My husband is honestly my biggest success story. When I started this personalized art store back in November of 2019, he knew absolutely nothing about online selling, but I taught him everything I knew and we set up our own website from day one. We didn't wait until we were ready or until we had everything figured out. Like literally in 2 weeks, we were launched. And that first full year in business in 2020, we made over 7 figures with this business alone in sales because we owned our own digital real estate in addition to renting space on someone else's platform. Also, because of, what happened in 2020, everyone was stuck at home and shopping online. So a lot of businesses did well that year. Now, here is what's really interesting. Last month, our own store brought in almost exactly what we made on Etsy, right? But really think about what that means. We can make the same amount of money on a platform we completely control as we can on this massive marketplace with millions of built-in shoppers. And we spent proportionately the same amount on ads to get traffic to our site. So they were equally as profitable. That tells you everything you need to know about whether you actually need Etsy or not. You do not need their traffic. You can build your own. You don't need to post all the time in social media. You don't need to have a big launch or constantly releasing new products. We don't do any of that, but I will tell you what we did in a bit. And unlike our Etsy sales, which could disappear tomorrow if they change their algorithm or they decide they don't like us, our website sales come from something we own that cannot be taken away from us, or at least it's a lot harder. We control every single part of the customer experience on our site. We decide the pricing, the policies, how the site looks, everything. And we don't have to be as influenced as what the competition is doing as you would be selling on Etsy. Plus, we own all of the customer data. So when someone buys from our store, they are our customer. We can email them to remind them to buy again during holiday seasons, invite them to sales, build a real relationship, On Etsy, they're Etsy's customers who just happen to buy your product. There's no easy way, according to the terms of service in Etsy, to build that long-term relationship with Etsy customers, which means building a business that lasts the long term for years and years is much harder to do on Etsy alone. I have been in online business for almost 2 decades now. One of the reasons I can do this for so long is because I don't rely on Etsy or other platforms I cannot control or don't own. So for our own websites, we now focus mainly on paid ads, that's Google, Facebook, and Instagram ads, instead of trying to compete inside someone else's search engine, which fluctuates in demand. We are driving people directly to something we built and control. The best part is every dollar we invest in improving our website, sending traffic our way, every hour we spend optimizing it, every customer review we get, all of that builds into the value of our business over time. Our website is an actual asset that if we wanted to, we could sell someday. But the Etsy shop is not worth a lot of money, if anything at all, because if we wanted to walk away, Etsy can shut it down at any time. It's just too volatile. Now, if you're worried building your own website sounds really hard to do, which I get, and it's why a lot of people do start on Etsy, I have a solution for you. I was recently actually looking at one of my Assail Day students, Ryan's website, and I was so impressed by how professional and beautiful it looked and how fast her site was. She asked for a website review and I went on there and it was just like, I have nothing to say but good things about your site. This is incredible. And I was like, who's your website builder? Because this doesn't look like Shopify. Turns out she built the entire thing using Hostinger, who is also sponsoring today's video. So what I love about Hostinger is they have an AI website builder that makes it super fast to create a professional site, even if you've never built a website before. You don't need any tech know-how to do this. If you can read English and click buttons on the screen, you can build your own beautiful professional website in one afternoon. Now, normally I recommend a .com domain name to go with your website because people are more familiar with that. But a nice perk with Hostinger is they also give you a free .store domain name, which is perfect if you're just starting out and watching your budget. They have a lot of cool features, but one of my favorites that really impressed me was their AI product listing tool that can create multiple product listings at once and automatically fills in all the details based on the product photos that you upload. It saves you hours of work, which means you're more likely to actually launch your online store instead of procrastinating on it. But most importantly, the checkout process on Hostinger is smooth and fast, which makes a huge difference in making or losing the sale. So if you're ready to stop paying rent to other platforms and start building something you actually own that will last you for years, check out Hostinger in the description below, and I'll put a link here on the video as well. Having your own website sounds amazing, right? But here's something most people don't realize. Just having a website alone is not enough. You need the right foundations or you will end up like my first business that has been losing money every single month this year. Okay, so I started Tiny Hands back in 2006 making scented polymer clay fruit jewelry. It sounds cute, but I made literally every foundational mistake you could possibly make. First, I was designing products I loved instead of thinking about what other people actually wanted to buy. I was obsessed with making miniature food because I loved it as a kid, but scented food jewelry isn't something people search for. Nobody wakes up thinking, really need to buy a strawberry scented cupcake necklace for my niece today. Second, I had no idea who my customer was or how to find them online. I thought my jewelry was for adults like me who loved cute things, but how do you even begin to find people like that online? It's not like there's a cute things Facebook group. It's just too vague. It's not specific enough. I eventually learned that a lot of the people buying from me were actually moms or aunties buying gifts for little girls, but that took years of trial and error and collecting all that data. But even then, it is still not super easy to find those people online. Third, my pricing was completely wrong for my market. My necklaces cost $30 to $50 each because they take time to make, and it also costs a lot more money to get this novel product idea in front of people who don't even know it exists. And unfortunately, most parents don't want to spend that much on jewelry for kids. So there's this huge mismatch between what I was charging and what my ideal customers were willing to pay. I also built a whole business around scented products. The fragrances don't last forever, so customers would buy a necklace, love it for a few months, then email me being upset that it didn't smell like cookies anymore. I would get refund requests from people saying they couldn't smell anything, but when they returned the package, we could smell it, or maybe they didn't like a certain scent that I gave a product. Everyone's nose is different. Scent is such a subjective experience. And I would be sad that people weren't appreciating the charms more for the charms themselves. This scent issue also killed my wholesale business. I worked with sales reps. I did trade shows. I got into over 100 stores across the United States at some point, but stores didn't want to reorder because customers would complain about the scent fading and the price point was just too high for impulse purchases. All of these foundation problems meant it took me a long time to make a full-time income from Tiny Hands. And I've never done it, it feels impossible to grow this business beyond $200,000 a year. Even now, it just struggles, and it continues to struggle more than any other business I have. Last month, it made $6,652 in revenue, but after expenses, I actually lost $642. At this point, I've basically let it coast while I focus on businesses with better foundations. This is why having a website alone isn't enough. You need the right foundations from the start, or you will spend years struggling like I did. The foundations that actually matter are products that people want to buy and who are willing to pay good money for. You need to know exactly who your customer is and where to find them online. Third, your pricing needs to match what your market expects to pay. And fourth, you need a business model that is sustainable long-term, not dependent on things you can't control. When I started my newer businesses, I made sure to get these foundations right from day one. And that's why the business my husband operates now hit 7 figures in its first year, and why my coaching business, Creative Hive, grew so much faster and bigger than Tiny Hands ever did, despite me trying so hard. If you want to learn exactly what these foundations look like in more depth and how to set them up correctly from the beginning for your business, I teach all of this in my free workshop. I'll break down exactly the system I use to build profitable online stores that don't take decades to figure out, so you can make sales easily from day one. You can sign up for that in the link in the description below. I know what you're thinking now. You're like, oh great, another course creator claiming to make money teaching other people how to make money. But I've been sharing my income reports online since 2014, way before it was trendy. My oldest blog post for my coaching business is from 2011. This isn't some new thing I just started to cash in on, and I have firsthand experience of running my own online stores. I started Creative Hive because I am genuinely obsessed and nerd out over marketing and business strategy. Like, I get excited about conversion rates and sales funnels and testing different email subject lines. I know that sounds weird, but it's like a game for me. I learned to enjoy it. Here's how it actually happened. I figured out how to build a successful online store for myself through years of trial and error with Tiny Hands, right? I mean, it is my ugliest baby. Would I call it a failure? Yes. Would I call it a success? Yes, it is both things. And I realized I had a system that actually worked when everything else I was trying failed me. So I started teaching this system to other people, and it started working for them too. But here's the thing about selling courses. I have found it is way harder than people think because a lot of people make it sound super easy and fast to do. For years, Creative Hive was barely profitable, and I had a lot of trouble growing it. In 2019, I was making about $10,000 a month, which sounds good until you factor in all the expenses, right? It's not enough to be a full-time salary. And at that point, I was already running the business for several years. Digital products, in my opinion, are much harder to sell than physical products because everything is intangible. You have to make it feel real and valuable to people who can't literally hold it in their hands. And there's a lot more competition for it because it's so easy to make. So you have to work harder at communicating its value. One messaging problem, one funnel issue, one pricing mistake can be the difference between a profitable month versus losing money. I spent years tweaking and testing and honestly struggling to make it work consistently. Then, about a year ago, I made some fundamental changes to my sales funnel and my marketing approach. I invested over $20,000 in hiring an instructional designer and over a year spent into completely revamping my A Sale a Day course because I wanted to create something that actually gets incredible results for people. I also worked with different coaches. Some of them were amazing, others not so much, but I always learned something from all of them. And I took the best bits and applied them into my business. So by 2024, I was consistently hitting $30,000 a month. And now I'm making more than double that. And a lot of that also has to do with YouTube. So last month for Creative Hive, we brought in $67,913, and that is not counting sponsorship or YouTube money, which we'll talk about next. So I am not some flashy guru with my laptop life, sitting on a beach, drinking a martini. I am just someone who figured out a system that worked for me consistently too, And then it also worked for other people. I have students like Stephanie from Pottery Awesomeness, Ivan and Gabby from The Paper Memory, Jen from Forge Flair, and so many others selling everything from jewelry to planners to even quivers, who are building real sustainable businesses and quitting their jobs. And when they started, they had not even a product idea. Just sharing information is not enough. There is an art and a skill and a lot of psychology and empathy to how you do it. And I think that's the major difference between a short-lived course business and one that can persevere for many years. It's actually being a good teacher. I actually really struggled with learning as a kid, and I still do as an adult actually. I think that in part makes me a good teacher because I always aim to make things as simple, easy, and repeatable as possible for other people. I also recommend having a website where you can share your knowledge and build trust over time with your audience, because building authority for your name as an educator is more important in a course business than a product business. This is a completely different business model than my product stores. Here, I focus heavily on content marketing. I write blog posts, I make YouTube videos like this one, and create free resources that show people what I know and my experience, right? And then of course, a percentage of those people who consume my content become students of mine over time. This is also why, even though I generally don't post on social media for my online stores, I do use it more for my coaching business as a way to share my content. But I also don't rely on it, which I think is a key difference. It's a lot of what we talked about earlier with Etsy, right? About things you can control versus can't control. YouTube is my favorite platform to build content on because it doesn't require me to post constantly or consistently in order to reach a lot of people. And my videos have a much longer lifespan than short form content on, say, Instagram or TikTok. So that's super leveraged income because the time I spend on one YouTube video has compound effects over time. I actually didn't monetize my YouTube channel until December 2022, which I regret not doing sooner because it is completely passive income. And I didn't take on a single sponsor until this year because I was scared of what people would think. I get dozens of sponsor emails every day. Seriously, I am overwhelmed by them. And I say no to basically all of them because most are for products I have never used or do not believe in. For the longest time, I thought if I turned on ads or took sponsors, you guys would think I was selling out. But then I realized if I only work with companies I actually use and recommend to my students anyway, why is it a bad thing that I get paid for that? And these ads you see on my videos, you get to watch this whole thing for free and get a ton of information. So this mindset shift changed everything because between AdSense, which is the YouTube money, and the sponsors that I work with, that brought in $22,844 last month. Kicking myself that I didn't do this sooner. Isn't it interesting and also kind of empowering to know how much we get in our own way to making money? Are you making money difficult for yourself too, like I was? That amount of money I made from YouTube is just from sponsors and AdSense. It is not counting the sales I have made from people buying my courses. In 2024, I tracked over 6 figures of sales that came directly from YouTube. And that's also not counting the indirect sales. Here's what I've learned about YouTube. Posting consistently all the time is not the thing that is going to get you a lot of views and attract sponsors and makes you sales. It just increases your chances of you landing on a video concept that people like. The first 100,000 subscribers I got was through posting once a week without fail for an entire year. Sounds great, it was a lot of work, but most of those 100,000 subscribers never came back to watch any of my future videos. Because I would post new content and it would get less than 1,000 views. For a channel with 100,000 subscribers, doesn't make much sense, right? But then on the flip side, there are countless channels that have just a small handful of videos, like under 50 or under 100 videos with millions of subscribers. How often you post and the amount of videos you have doesn't play as huge of a role in getting you a lot of reach and subscribers as most people think. Instead, over the last year, I've developed a system that I've not seen anyone else do to basically guarantee that every video I make gets me on the YouTube homepage so I don't have to waste time producing a video that no one is going to see. Would you rather post 52 videos to get to 100,000 subscribers or only post 12 videos? That is the difference between the two strategies, because my next 100,000 subscribers came so much more easily and with far less work, and I get to have a lot more fun. I'm actually creating a pilot program teaching this system, showing you how I guarantee that every video I make knocks it out of the park. It is going to be the lowest price it will ever be, and the only time you'll get to work with me in this close proximity in this container. So if that is something that interests you, you can join the waitlist for that here. There is a link in the description below, okay? So now let's talk about expenses and what we actually made as profit. We made $44,000 in before tax profit, which is about 30% profit margins across all of our businesses, which I'm actually really excited about considering I had an entire business that didn't make money at all. Also, I should mention that when you're making money at that scale, like 6 figures of sales, it is normal for profit margins to not look like, 70% or 60%, as it often will look when you are a smaller business and you're doing everything yourself. So having a 30% profit margin is actually very healthy. So what did we spend on? A lot of it goes into paid ads. For the one Etsy shop, we spend $8,361 to make $26,200. $50,000 went into Facebook, Instagram, and Google ads for my coaching business and my Shopify stores, which is a lot. And I definitely did overspend here on a big aggressive marketing push last month that almost lost me money actually. So I know not to do that again. I am working on lowering costs here because it is our biggest expense. For the print-on-demand business, we spent $14,096 in printing costs and product costs for the print-on-demand printers. And our team, who enables us to not work around the clock, cost us $14,989. The rest of expenses go into smaller categories like tech and software, subscriptions, fees, and so on. If you're thinking, this sounds great, but where do I even begin? Just pick one thing. Just one, okay? Start it, see it through, get it going real good first. Have the focus to do that before you try to do something else and spread yourself too thin, because that's a mistake I see a lot of people make when they start to diversify. If you are someone who overthinks like I do and then never gets anything done or is too paralyzed to even start, watch this next video here where I talk all about overthinking and how you might be able to start addressing that and get it out of the way so you can finally build that business and life of your dreams.